by the highways. Now our next speaker, he has two kids, one in Georgia and one at Auburn. He's with the ARC, so if y'all will help me welcome Tad Leithead.
I asked him to be brief and mention my kids. So that was a perfect introduction. You can't go wrong with me. Well, sometimes you can go wrong with me mentioning my kids. But most of the time, I'm proud of them. I have a 23-year-old who's a junior at Georgia and a 19-year-old who's in his second freshman year at Auburn. Yeah, War Eagle. Yep, ULI Monroe in overtime. Yeah, War damn Eagle. Falcons are looking good. Now, I asked the ARC for some facts about Paulding, and they came back with all sorts of things about housing and demographics, etc. But the two most interesting things they sent me were that both Patty Loveless and Travis Tritt are from Paulding. Is that true? And I'm a big fan. I'm lying. But I do like the name of this song, Here's a Quarter, Call Someone Who Cares. And I'm a member of a country club. I live in the country, and this is my club. So it is always a pleasure for me to be in Paulding. Y'all have something going on here. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe you know better than I do. I think it has something to do with the Chamber of Commerce. I think it has something to do with Carolyn's leadership. I think it has something to do with Carrick and the board of directors and the amount of energy that y'all put into business development and into this county. But whenever I visit Paulding, and I always seem to come to this particular building, I feel an energy here and an excitement here that I don't feel around the rest of the region. And I'm going to stipulate right at the beginning, although y'all are not a member of the Atlanta Regional Commission, Paulding is very much a part of the Atlanta metropolitan region, and we can't do without you. I have a speech that I give to groups like this that I call WASTE in the back of my mind: water, aging services, transportation, and education. The issues that I think are facing us in the region. But Susan called me earlier this week and made a specific request that I give a speech that I give very rarely. Matter of fact, this is the fourth time I've ever presented this. It's a leadership speech. It's something that I give to leadership groups. The last group that I gave this to is the Model Atlanta Regional Commission, which is a group of 17 and 18-year-olds. And the reason that I typically don't give it is because it's more personal, more about me than I typically like to include. And secondly, it includes a fairly significant challenge for leadership. And although I think it's fitting that the leadership Paulding class is here and being introduced today, it's not really designed for a group of already established leaders, but at the same time, we're in a situation in our region and our city and our state today where leadership is so badly needed that a leadership message, I don't believe, here in Paulding County will fall on deaf ears. So I want to talk about my journey, and I want to talk about Atlanta's journey along with it. This presentation has two titles. One is Atlanta at a Crossroads, but the better title is 100 Years of Atlanta, and we're halfway there. So I want to talk a little bit about our history, and I want to talk a lot about our future, but let me start here. It's a very, very important picture to me. You may recognize at least one of the people in the photo. You probably don't recognize the rest. There are 5 things that I need to tell you about this picture. One is that it was taken in the Oval Office on December the 23rd of 1959. The guy all the way to the left is my grandfather, Barry T. Leithead. The person standing next to him was his best friend, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was also at the time the President of the United States. The little guy there is me, Tad Leithead, age 4, in the Oval Office, and by the way, I have not been back. But on that day, I was in the Oval Office, and then the lady on the left, on your right, is my mother, Margot Leithead. And there's several reasons that I wanted to show you this. These are the three people that had the most influence on me in my life. All three of them talked to me in my early years about the importance of making a difference. You know, at the time, I thought that all 5-year-olds got to visit the President of the United States in the Oval Office, and it was just my turn. I wasn't particularly impressed, as you can see from the facial expression. And then the last thing that I want to tell you is that my granddad, his original mode of transportation was horseback. He grew up in Wyoming, and he got around on horseback. And as I grew up, he taught me not only to love, but to ride horses. And that's something that I have continued to do throughout my life, not as much anymore. But I rode competitively for years and years until my wife and I started having children. And these three people really had a huge impact on my life in terms of convincing me that we are all placed here to make a difference. Now, the second reason that I wanted to show you this photo is I said 59. It was taken on December the 23rd, 1960. 4 years prior to this, almost exactly 4 years prior to this picture being taken, Dwight Eisenhower signed into law the Interstate Investment and Defense Act, which was the bill that he introduced to build the interstate highway system. Prior to that, there were no interstates. Can you imagine? No interstates. He'd come from World War II, where it was very, very difficult to move troops and missiles and equipment and tanks because of the inadequate roads. And he envisioned an interstate system that would allow us to move our defenses quickly from coast to coast in order to defend our borders and to defend our country. But at the same time, he commissioned what at the time was the single largest public works project in the history of America, what became known as the Eisenhower Interstate System. Next slide, please. So to my topic, Atlanta at a crossroads. Within a few months of the picture that I just showed you being taken, this is what Atlanta looked like. At the time, we had about the same population as Birmingham, Alabama, about 500,000 people. But because of the Interstate Investment Act, the city of Atlanta found itself at the crossroads of three major interstates, I-75, I-85, and I-20. This picture is taken looking right down the downtown connector at the skyline of Atlanta in 1960. And that is the interstate system under construction. About 50 years ago today, really. 52 years ago now. Next slide. That's the same picture. That is exactly the same picture taken from the same angle 50 years later. This picture was taken 2 years ago. So you can see that through the leadership of Dwight D. Eisenhower, Atlanta truly was at a crossroads. And because of the intersection of those major transportation systems and our proximity to the coast and the rail lines that we already had serving our community, Atlanta began to grow by leaps and bounds to what it is today, a thriving metropolis of 5.5 million people, encompassing 10 counties, plus others, including Paulding, and growing from 5.5 million to 10 million over the coming years. But the growth of Atlanta and the success of Atlanta was not entirely due to the interstate system. I want to suggest a couple of other pivotal events that occurred in our history that brought us to where we are today. One, Dwight D. Eisenhower's leadership as far as the interstates are concerned. Two, Martin Luther King's passion to make the city of Atlanta the international center for civil rights. Number three, William B. Hartsfield made the decision to cause and to build the the largest and busiest airport in the world. Now remember, we had 500,000 people. I don't know if any of you are as old as I am, but before Hartsfield's vision was in place, the Atlanta airport was literally a Quonset hut. It was a round, sort of silver-looking building with a couple of runways. And William Hartsfield decided personally that he would cause Atlanta to have the most significant airport in the country, what became the most significant airport in the world. And then finally, a fellow by the name of Billy Payne woke up one morning and decided that the Olympics should come to Atlanta. And not only should they come to Atlanta, but they should come to Atlanta in 1996, which was the 100th anniversary of the modern Olympics, in competition with Athens, Greece, which was the original city, of course, where the interstates, I'm mixing my metaphors here, where the Olympics had been held. And I'd like to suggest to you that there's a theme that runs through those four pivotal events in our history. That theme is that one person, one individual, made a decision and exercised the leadership that was necessary to bring about that vision through the help and support of people who would follow them, literally in droves, in an effort to support them in the realization of that vision. But it really speaks, I think in this city, maybe more than any other city I've ever visited, to the power of the individual making an individual decision based on that person's passion to realize a vision and to make something very, very significant happen. So here we are today, 50 years of road building, of growth, of growing pains, of expansion, of population growth, and all of the pain and suffering and problems that come along with that. But we're at the halfway mark. We're 50 years in to what I'm calling 100 years of Atlanta. So, taking a lesson from all this, we at the ARC embarked 2 years ago on a program that we called 50 Forward. Next slide, please. 50 Forward was a plan where we decided to envision what Atlanta would look like in 50 years and begin making a plan today that would allow us to recognize that 50-year vision. So once again, the city of Atlanta found themselves at a crossroads after 50 extraordinary years of success to try to exercise and implement that success for the next 50 years in a very, very challenging environment, which all of you are intimately familiar with. So we started thinking about what were really the challenges that faced our region. And if I could have the next slide. I don't know if you all are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of need, but I've stolen from Maslow, and we use this as a building block, or as the building block for how we would put together our vision. Next slide. At the essential base of our region's needs is water. We can survive bad traffic if necessary, but if we run out of water, it's over. As you may know, we've made some great strides in terms of water over the last year or so with some favorable court rulings, and just last week, Alabama removing the last of their litigation against us in the water wars. It's not over, but that's a huge step in the right direction towards securing the water supply in Lake Lanier for consumption by this region. But the fact remains that we are in the largest metropolitan area served by the smallest water basin in the country. There's only 1,000 square miles, and if the rain doesn't fall in that 1,000 square miles where Lake Lanier is, and it doesn't get to us. It can rain all at once in Atlanta, and it's great for the mums, and it's great for your yard, but unless it falls in Lake Lanier, it's not available to us for consumption. So first and most important, we believe that over the next 50 years, it's important through capturing more water through additional reservoirs, through conservation of our existing precious resources, and through working with the Corps of Engineers around a water control management, the 3 C's, control, capture, and conserve, to guarantee an adequate and clean water supply for our region for the next 50 years. Next slide, please. The next May surprise you as aging services. Right now we have 750,000 people in this region over the age of over the age of 65. In the next 20 years, that amount is going to double. It's going to go from 750,000 to 1.5 million. And by the way, just so you don't think I'm talking about somebody else, I'm 57. So in 8 years, I will enter the officially the elderly category. And you know, when Social Security was put in place, it kicked in at age 65, and the average life expectancy for an American was age 67. Today, it's 79. People are living longer, and not only are they living longer, they're living a higher quality of life. But their needs are very different. I have an 84-year-old mother-in-law. She's just about to leave to go on a Mediterranean cruise, literally. She's, you know, they say if you want to, when you're deciding whether to get married, take a look at the mom. I did. She is one good-looking 84-year-old. She is a line dancer. She is, she's a widow, and she's known as the Belle of Lynbrook. She has, at any given time, she has 3 boyfriends. I'm ashamed of her. But she is as vibrant and as vital as anybody I know, but she should not drive. So how do we get, the most challenging thing of getting her on this Mediterranean cruise is getting her to the airport. If I can get her to the airport, they take care of it from there. So here in Atlanta, how do we provide transportation services, health services, access to the grocery store, access to the hair salon? How do we make sure that as our population ages, they still have access to the same conveniences and same opportunities that those of us have who are younger, even if their health is beginning to decline or they're confined to a wheelchair or they're unable to drive. So continuing to maintain the quality of life and serve our aging population is a huge challenge facing us going forward. Next slide, please. Next, of course, this will come as no surprise to you, transportation. We had a big day on July 31st. Had the opportunity to pass a referendum that would have infused an additional $8.5 billion into our transportation system here in the region. I'm sure most of you are aware that failed. It not only failed, it failed badly, 65-35. So now we are working with existing resources. But if you ask people about the biggest challenge that they face every day in this region, the first thing they're going to say is traffic. As long as the water keeps coming out of the tap, traffic will be the biggest problem that we have. So people are very, very concerned about traffic, and I don't intend to elaborate on that anymore. We are in the process now of deciding what now after the failure of the referendum. Next slide, please. Then we have education. All right, it's almost a cliche to say that the education of our youth is the future of our region, future of our nation. We have some really, really fine K-12 public school systems in our region and in our state, but overall we traditionally rank 48th or 49th in terms of education as measured by many measurements, and over the last several years our SAT scores have actually dwindled by an average of about 30 points. So in order to continue to have a quality workforce, and in order to continue to serve our community, and in order to continue to attract quality growth, we are going to have to address education in this system. And after talking about those 4 issues, we came up with, next slide please, a vision for Atlanta. Our vision for Atlanta is 50 years from today is a city of 10 million people with a plentiful and clean water supply, a vision of a city that has no real traffic problems, where transportation choices are available to include everything from sidewalks to transit, roads, vans, carpools, and everything in between. I don't know if y'all were in town the other day when candidate for Vice President Ryan came to Atlanta. He flew into Hartsfield and went to a meeting in Cobb County, closed the downtown connector from 5:03 until 5:53. Downtown connector was closed for 50 minutes. Atlanta was closed for 50 minutes. There was nothing moving. There were people stuck in parking decks. So continuing to invest in our system is very, very important, and offering choices. If the roads are clogged, you got a transit option. where no matter where you live in our region, you have an excellent education available, both K through 12 as well as higher level education, and where we maintain an excellent quality of life for our aging population for as long as they are in enough health to be able to enjoy that quality of life. And when they don't have that health, a dignified way for them to grow old with services and programs that they require. So how do we go about realizing this vision? Next slide, please. You know, you guys are going to enter into leadership training here pretty soon. All of us have been through some sort of leadership and program, and you know, I've heard an awful lot of people define what leadership really means. And the best explanation for leadership that I've ever heard came from Lisa, who is not only my friend, but also served as the president of the city council in Atlanta for a couple of years and ran for mayor. And she describes leadership very simply as passion in action, and explains it this way: figure out what your passion is, do something about it. Put it into action. And as I said at the beginning, I think one of the things, and this is no criticism of any elected official in this room or anywhere in our state, but right now, we're spread from here and there. There's an awful lot going on in our country, in our state, and there's an awful lot of disagreement, and we're suffering, I think, from a visionary leadership that can draw us all together. And you know, I went back to the 4 examples that I just gave you. What was it about those people that as individuals they were able to cause something to happen? And I mentioned at the beginning of the speech that my grandfather taught me to ride. And I rode horses from the time I was 2 years old. I had a pony, and I rode from the time I was 2 years old. And as I got older, I started to ride competitively and actually competed at a relatively high level. And if any of you ever watch the Olympics, or if any of you are horsemen or horse people, there's an Olympic event. It's called the 3-day event, and it's 3 phases of competition. The first is dressage, which is kind of like figure skating on a horse, and the final phase is jumping, what they call show jumping, which is jumping over fences in a ring. But the middle phase is called cross country. When you ride cross country, you get on a horse and you gallop 5 or 6 miles across open fields, and you jump over these big, solid obstacles. If you crash into them, the obstacle doesn't fall down, you do, or your horse does. And when I was learning to ride, when my grandfather was teaching me to ride, and then later when I was teaching kids to ride, we used to talk to them about the phenomenon of galloping down to a fence. Equestrian events are the only sport in the world where there's a team made up of a human being and an animal. You know, I mean, we've all had teammates, but in this case, your teammate is a horse, and you're on the horse's back, and you're galloping down to this fence, and the horse may jump over it, which is a good thing, or he may not, which is a crash. And if you watch it on the Olympics, those crashes occur. And so what we used to say to people is, as you're galloping down to the fence, throw your heart over the fence. Throw your heart to the other side of the fence, and the horse will follow. If you can see your heart, if you can see your passion, if you've made the commitment to be on the other side of the fence, the horse will follow. And in all the years that I galloped down to big obstacles, I threw my heart over the fence, and never once did that horse fail to leave the ground. It works. So how does that apply to a leadership context here in this region today? Well, what I say to leadership groups, and this is clearly a leadership group, but an already very accomplished leadership group, is that leadership is just like galloping down to that fence. If you know what your passion is, and if you're putting it into action, and if you decide that whatever goal you have established to get from here to there is worth your time, then throw your heart into it. Throw your heart to the other side. And not only will you follow your heart, but others will follow you in droves. It works. Just like it does with a horse, it works. And I've given you examples that prove that it works. Passionate individuals one individual who made a decision, threw their heart into it, and brought about extraordinary global change. I was influenced by those three people that I just showed you to make a difference. And I decided a long time ago, in the Regional Leadership Institute class in 1990, I decided that I wanted to make a difference in the Atlanta region. It was 22 years ago. And I've been on that path ever since, and it's the reason, that decision that I made in 1990, is the reason that I am now chairman of the Atlanta Regional Commission. I'm working at it for 22 years. And I don't know whether I was the best qualified, but I was the most passionate. And the board decided, they saw that passion, and they elected me to do that. So I've made the decision to make a difference here in Atlanta, in this region. Many of you have made the decision to make a difference here in Paulding, and I congratulate you for that. If you haven't made a decision where your passion is, then do so. Decide. But once you know what your passion is, put your action plan together, throw your heart into it, and I guarantee you you'll be successful. So I just leave you with a question, and then I'll take questions. I've decided that my passion is to make a decision here in the Atlanta region. And I would simply ask all of you, what is your decision? What is your passion? And how will you make a difference? Thank you very much. Garrett, do I have time for questions, or should I?
Absolutely.
Are there any, put my glasses back on so I can see you all again. Do y'all have any questions or comments?
Can you talk a little bit about transportation and what's next for it since the response law?
The question is, talk a little bit about transportation and what's next, given the failure of the referendum. That's a great question. I was in a meeting this morning with Todd Long, who's the Deputy Commissioner of the DOT, and Toby Carr, who's the new Director of Planning, appointed by the Governor. The Governor's Transportation Liaison, a guy by the name of Edens, and I didn't pick up his last name, and some other leaders at the Metro Chamber. And essentially, what we've got to do in this region is we've got to make do with the existing resources. It's coming directly from the Governor's office. There isn't going to be another referendum anytime soon. We are not going to identify other funding sources above and beyond what's already available. There's been discussion about, there's 1 penny of fuel tax that goes into the general fund of the state. They're not anticipating changing that. So essentially what now we're looking at doing in this region is taking the existing resources, and we know what they are, about $58 billion available to us from the federal government, plus about $1.5 billion a year at the state level. It comes from the fuel tax. And we've got to figure out a way to address our transportation needs in this region with the existing available funds. So it has to do with prioritization. It has to do with value engineering. I'm personally involved in a project that had $80 million allocated in the referendum. We think we can build it for 35 now. It's not the same project, but the $35 million project does about 70% of the job, you know, for less than half the money. And I think you're going to see us doing more and more of that. I think it'll be a long time before we build any more significant transit in this region. There was $3.5 billion in the referendum for investment in transit. There doesn't seem to be any appetite nor available funding anywhere for investment in transit. So our biggest challenge will be investment in keeping the existing transit system that we have alive, that being the MARTA system, and CCT in Cobb, and the express bus system in Gwinnett, et cetera. So it's, we're not going to see new funding sources. We're just going to have to get real smart about prioritization, building those projects that make the biggest difference, and value engineering projects. And I realize that's a relatively vague answer, but we're, you know, we'd all sort of counted on passing the thing. And we planned a celebration, not a funeral. Did I see a hand? Yes, sir.
I have a question. You structured your chart.
Yes.
You had elderly services below transportation, but you had said that transportation was the most important aspect outside of water. Why was it structured that way?
Simply because I believe that you've got two aspects of issues that are facing this region. One is the people's perception. And the people's perception is traffic is their biggest problem because they deal with it every day. I mean, we all deal with it every day. You know, when you get up in the morning, they're not on the radio talking to you about the water in Lake Lanier. They're not on the radio talking to you about what kind of services we're providing to the elderly today. They're talking to you about where the traffic is so that you can go another way. But in my opinion, and ultimately in the opinion of the Atlanta Regional Commission Board, is that if you really look at the challenges and the priorities that are facing this region, I mean, this is easy, but if you got up in the morning and you're worried about traffic and you turn on the sink and the water doesn't come out, you're going to forget about traffic until you figure out why you don't have any water in your house. Several years ago, we lost water in our house for about 8 hours. You ever go without water in your house for 8 hours? You continuously forget it. You know, you flush a toilet or you open the tap to brush your teeth and go, wait, there's no water. You can't think about anything else till you get your water back. The next is aging services. If Cherokee County and Fayette County have the two fastest growing aging populations in the state, and that creates all kinds of challenges to the infrastructure, very expensive challenges, particularly as it relates to healthcare. You know, 80% of our healthcare dollars get spent in the last, I know there's WellStar people here, I hope I got this right. 80% of our healthcare dollars get spent in the last 6 months of people's lives. And we've got to figure out a way to manage the aging process, because people are going to live longer and longer and longer, and they're going to want more and more services and programs. So this is set up not based on what people's perception of the challenges are, but what we believe are really the challenges that need to be addressed in order for us to continue as a great international city. Now, they're not all the challenges. You know, we've got the arts, there's all kinds of challenges facing us as a region, but those are the ones that I believe are at the very core of the continued success, vibrancy, vitality, quality of life that we've all come to experience for the period of time that we've been here in Atlanta. Yes, sir. Let me know when I have to stop.
In spite of our challenges, can we continue to be a role model for other cities in the country?
The question is, even though we're facing challenges, can we continue to be a role model? You know, I gave a speech the other day at the State of the Region. And one of the questions that I posed to the audience is, you know, is excellence still within our grasp? We have come to expect excellence. You know, a week before the referendum, one of the national transportation organizations ranked the road systems on a state-by-state basis, and out of 50 states, we ranked number 3 in terms of just the quality of our roads. We've set an extraordinary example. You know, anybody ever drive to Texas? You know, as soon as you leave Georgia, the roads bang along, and you come back to Georgia, you want to jump out and kiss the ground. We have Hartsfield, Falcons, the Braves. You know, I mean, the Olympics. I mean, all of us can go on and on. Atlanta has established excellence for the last 50 years. Now everybody's gunning for us. There was an article in the paper the day after the referendum that says, Atlanta voters fund Denver's transportation investment. That money is going elsewhere because we don't have the ability to leverage those dollars at the federal level. So is excellence still within our grasp? Absolutely. But as a city of 5.5 million people growing to 10, the challenges are extraordinary. But there's a whole bunch of cities in this country right now that would trade places with us right now, because what we're suffering from is success. What we're suffering from is excellence. You know, there's an old saying, you know, if you're leading the race, don't look behind you, because somebody's probably gaining on you. And that's where we are in this region. We've got the lead. You know, the referendum failed. I haven't seen anybody moving out. We're still moving in. We're losing jobs and gaining population. What does that say about our region? People want to be here. Young people, what they call the young and the restless, which is a demographic that's bigger than the baby boomers. Those people are coming here in droves. And they're going to places like Buckhead and Midtown and downtown where they have access to transit and where they can walk. And they want that type of an environment. So, yeah, we are still a model. We just need to stay a model. Yes, sir.
You touched a little on education and the challenges we've had in the recent past regarding our education, and especially Metro Atlanta. In your opinion, the upcoming vote on the charter schools, what's your position on that? Can you express a position on that?
Well, I'm not supposed to do that, but what the hell? I had the great experience of working for Mr. Tom Cousins for 10 years. And I saw him take what used to be called Little Vietnam, East Lake, that has a great golf course, and besides that was a place where the police didn't even like to go. And people who have been members of that golf club for a long time talk about hearing gunfire while they were playing golf. Mr. Cousins, based on his love of community and love of golf, he bought the golf course, and he spent 30 years renovating that community. And right at the very heart of that community is the Drew Charter School. When he bought that property, about 18% of kids who enrolled in kindergarten were graduating from high school, 18%. More were going to jail than were graduating, or were convicted of crimes than were graduating from school. Now it's 92% are graduating from high school, highest graduation rate anywhere in the region. I chalk that up to the charter school. So, you know, I'm a believer in choices and options. And nobody's going to be forced to do a charter school, but if that option exists, some people will take advantage of it, and I think that that gives the opportunity for another choice, another opportunity for excellence, and another mechanism for us delivering quality education to our children, and I'm all for that. So I'm not supposed to take political opinions, but I voted for it.
I'm glad you did.
And if I made anybody mad, I'm sorry. Okay, I have just gotten the hook. I'm flattered to be here, and I hope to be invited back again sometime, and I've really enjoyed being a part of your gathering today. Thank you. Unexpected. Thank you.
Tad talked about passion, and I'm not sure that everybody in this room knows that the Atlanta Regional Commission had always, most of the members of the commission are elected officials, such as chairman before Tad was Sam Owens, who is county commission chairman in Cobb County. It always had been an elected official who had been chairman of the Atlanta Regional Commission until Tad became the first non-elected official to become that. So I think that is very good evidence of his passion on behalf of our metropolitan area. So Tad, we recognize that and we appreciate that, and we have a small gift for you.